All right, so we're gonna start this recording over. We're gonna try to get both of these objects outside of Maya. Now, because at the moment they're set up on the same texture set because Painter thinks it's all the same material, how are we gonna fix it? We just need to change the material for these guys inside of Maya. Now, we don't need to make like a RenderMan material or anything like that. Any simple Lambert is fine. So what I'd recommend you guys do is just inside the hypershade, if you want, you can just do tab. Just make a couple new Lamberts. So just make some simple Maya Lambert materials. I would maybe name them just so you kind of at least know which one is which. So if you want, like, this is Lambert 2. I might call this box material. Oh, by the way, what I'm doing is I'm doing a control double click on the material, and that brings up the rename shortcut. So if you do a control double click, you can rename it. Well, this will be wooden pulley material. So I'm just making two new Lamberts, and we're just going to assign those to the appropriate objects. So you guys probably remember how to do most of this stuff, but select the box, right click on your material, assign material to selection.
So we're still going to be able to export them both together?
Yeah, it's still the same FBX file, but the FBX file will know they're different materials. So that's going to give us different texture sets inside of Painter. So kind of quickly do that. Naming the material is not really a big deal because we're going to change the name of this stuff in Painter anyway, but it's not bad for organization. Once you guys have put the material on there, just select those objects, and I want you to do an FBX export just like we did before. So both of those guys are selected, and find that same folder. And obviously I'm going to do a new Painter project. We're going to start this over. And just pick your new FBX file, and you should notice this time, see what happened? It's a little bit different. So just because I've got this new FBX export, and again, the only thing we change is we put two new materials on those different objects, or different shaders. And now we have different texture sets. Okay. Now I think like when we're working on it, it probably would make sense for the sake of like your laptop and performance to maybe work on them one at a time. And then occasionally, if you feel like it's important to see them together, you can do that. So like for the shelf and the wall, you could probably do like 95% of them just independently. But then you might want to see where they kind of get close to each other, because you may decide like, well, where the shelf butts up against the wall, that'd be kind of cool to have like some stain and dirt build up along that area. We can do that near the end. So if we want to focus on one material, what we're going to do is go into the texture sets, and you'll notice there's some solo buttons, and these are also visibility. So you can turn off the visibility of any of these guys. Now, if you have a lot of different objects, like maybe you have a project where there's like 6 of these guys all in Painter at the same time, if you click on one of them by themselves, like box, or I'll do the wooden pulley, and if I hit solo, that will auto hide all the other ones, and you're only looking at the one you specify. So just kind of make sure you're taking care of that. Focus on the one you want. I'll turn the visibility of the box off. Now the names for these are already fine. I kind of understand what this means. But if you want to change the name on the texture sets, you can do that. Double click, rename them.
Would it be kind of like if it's not shown, you're not affecting it at all?
Yes. Yeah, so like if you're currently on this one, when you put a material in the layers, you'll see that it's only on that specific guy. But even if they're both visible, if you're still on this texture set, it should only apply to it. So let me just try it out. Like I'm just going to drag that to it. See how it's only on there? If I click on the other texture set, see how that's missing from the layers? So it is looking at which one you are currently selecting, and that will have a huge effect on like what you see like in the layers and what you're editing. All right. We'll turn that off and kind of focus on this guy. Now this one's kind of a little unique because I don't really have good photo reference for it. I mean, I know what it's supposed to look like because I've used this before, but It's basically just like a wooden pulley, like something you'd see on like a ship. It's mostly cracked wood. There's some like little metal bolts that kind of go through it. So I'm not really going to try matching reference for this one. We're just going to kind of jump in here, make it look cool, and talk about a few new things. So like we did before, we need to get all of the mesh maps built immediately. So the mesh maps were like where we had like world position, curvature, occlusion, all that fun stuff. That's kind of what helped you guys get the generators to work. So like the corner of the leather was broken up on the book. So to do the mesh maps, you are going to go to your texture set settings, and we are going to use this button right here, Bake Mesh Maps. Let's click on that. Now over here under Bake Mesh Maps, turn off normal. We don't need an ID for this one. And we don't need thickness for this guys either. So just same thing as before, world space, normal, ambient occlusion, curvature, position. And bake. I'm doing bake wooden material. You can bake both if you want, but I'm just doing one for right now. Yeah, if you guys hit that one right there, that bake all texture sets, that would bake every single object that you had brought into Painter at once. But I just chose this guy first.
Okay, sorry, we turned off normal ID thickness?
Yes, you got it. Yep. All right. So we're going to try to make some kind of wood materials for this first. And I'll show you guys how some fill sets work. So in this guy, I'm going to hop down into my materials. And we're just going to look for something that would probably work. Now, this particular object is a relatively dry piece of wood. So I'm going to type in wood. This guy right here, we used it before. Most of you guys probably did that for the pages, like you kind of squashed it down quite a bit. So just grab the wood rough, drag it over to the layers. You should see it appear on the material once it or appear on the object once it updates. There we go. And that kind of default layer 1, which is just an empty layer, you can just get rid of that and delete it. And we will wait for that to end. I'm glad that's all in the recording. All right. So there's a couple kind of interesting things I can show you guys now that we're kind of looking at a slightly different object here. So if I zoom in and start looking at some of these sections, like most of it looks okay. If I kind of come around here, you'll sort of notice though in some spots there's still these kind of like fairly harsh texture seams that are forming. And this is just based on the way it's UV'd. So this is kind of the UV layout. These are the front parts of the pulley, and these are the parts kind of on the inside or on the back that you can't usually see. But I do have seams on a couple different areas, and even though it's not terribly noticeable, maybe that's an issue. If the camera's in the wrong spot, you can kind of see that. And a lot of that has to do with the properties of this particular material. It's set to UV projection. Now, if I change the projection mode to triplanar, let's just watch what happens. We go back, UV. See how like there's like an abrupt stop to some of these patterns? As soon as you go to triplanar, you can tell Painter is trying to blend those different sides together. It's not perfect, but it's attempting it. So really, like I kind of mentioned before with this one, there's not really like a right or wrong answer for triplanar, or if you do the UV projection. You just kind of have to look at the model and kind of figure out which one do you feel like looks better. Are the seams noticeable? If they are, try triplanar. If UV projection looks good and the seams aren't that big of a deal, you can totally stick with that one. I'm going to probably do triplanar, I think. We'll do that. We can also scale it. So if you want to scale this guy, you can use that to make the patterns like smaller, larger. I'll kind of scale that up a little bit, make them slightly smaller. And we're going to kind of scroll down a little bit more, and we're going to see what does this particular material have for properties. It's using color, height, roughness, and metallic, which is probably no metallic property to it because it's not metal. But it's really mainly these three right here. So,
Excuse me a second.
yeah.
Why is it that when I apply the wood texture to the layer, it created like a whole ton of layers?
Did you do the wood rough material or did you grab a smart material? Because if you grab like some of these smart materials are made up of multiple layers.
I mean, I typed in wood, and so I dragged one over. And
Which one did you grab though?
Yeah, it looks like you used wood walnut.
Oh yeah, so yeah, wood walnut is a smart material. This guy is like a folder that has a bunch of stuff inside of it. Here's wood rough or wood walnut.
Okay. So you can just delete all of that.
Looks cool. But this is made up of a ton of stuff. We're not going to worry about that. Okay.
Yeah, you can get rid of the other one.
So a couple of things I'm going to do is just kind of work on the color, and we're going to kind of maybe exaggerate some of the height detail to make it a little bit more bumpy. So this particular material, you can see we do have color options. There's some roughness control, which will like blur, the reflection. There's no metallic, which is good. There's also something called scratches. You can kind of see them. It's probably those little like nicks and cuts right there. So I'm sure if I pull scratches down, they should disappear. And there they go. They're gone. And every material is a little bit different on what they decided to give you, for controls. I'm going to go down to technical parameters, and I think on this one I want to change my height range. The height range is going to sort of modify like how intense that sort of bump effect is. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to crank the height range up and just see if this looks better. Maybe not that much. It's getting a little kind of wavy. We're going to pull that back. And I think for mine, I'm probably going to change the color just a little bit. It's kind of gray, so maybe I can just kind of like play with the color, move into a slightly more saturated tone, possibly change the hue if I felt like it was too warm, if that was a little off. We'll maybe stick with that. So just playing around with the color a little bit. Overall, this feels pretty good. Now, a couple problems is that this is still appearing on all the different objects. So this has like metal pieces built into it. That guy right there is supposed to be metal. So who can kind of guide me through the process of making sure the material's only on the right chunks? Because you guys did this a few different times the other day. Yeah, something about like a fill, like we have to use like that, the Polygon Fill to choose the different parts. Now, thankfully, these areas are completely different UV shells. So just as a kind of a recap on that, what I'm going to do for this one is make a folder. We'll call this maybe wood group. So making a folder. We're going to drag that material so it's in the group. So we're going to drag it up. So you can see that material's now in that folder or that group. And then on that group, we are going to make a black mask. Okay. And as soon as you put the black mask on the group, not the material, the group right here, you click on the mask, and then you're going to go up to the effect. And what did we do before to do the selection on the different parts? Paint. Yep, this is a paint layer. So with the mask selected, go up here to effect, and you're going to do add paint. And you'll see that little paint layer drops inside of that. And then from here, obviously you don't want to hand paint that. That's going to be not fun at all. What we want to do is use the paint layer, and then on the left side, you're going to pick Polygon Fill. You'll see the little wireframe pop up. And this is where you get to choose what the alpha value should be for those parts. So black, what it's currently at, means nothing's visible. That's why the whole thing is missing the material. I need to make all the wood sections white. So what I'm going to do is make sure down here in the Polygon Fill options, we're picking UV chunk. That's that little checker button. UV chunk, set to a white color, and I'm just going to click on this object right here. There's the wood. It's already working. I'm just going to kind of tumble around here, click on the back, that part. This needs to be wood. That's wood. That is probably it. Yeah, that is it. So the only ones left are these little guys right here, and these are all the metal pieces. All right, let's click back. That's good. Let's just do it one more time as kind of another refresher. Let's do it again for the metal. We'll do it a little bit faster. I'm going to make a new folder, metal group. Let's just find an interesting material. Maybe we'll do rust, so it's kind of beat up. I'll do rust coarse. We'll try that one out. And we're going to see it covers everything probably. There we go. There's our beautiful rust. And if you wanted to, you could play around with the color just like before. You could scale it. I'm really only concerned about what it's doing on these guys. We'll fix that in a second. But you can always scale it, play around with that stuff, rotate it, change color, your height. I'll maybe leave mine closer to where it started because I do kind of like seeing the breakup with like the darker and the lighter areas. That seems okay. And in this group, so we're going to select it. Once again, do the black mask on our new folder. And we're repeating the same process again. Click on the mask, make a paint layer. Make sure you're on the Polygon Fill. And then this time you're clicking on the other pieces. So that guy, this one, that, and it's also like the side of it. You can see right there. There we go. So now I have the rusted pieces assigned. And they seem to be okay. All right. Now I do want to kind of talk about some of like the PBR material effects and kind of what they're doing. I think you guys probably feel fairly comfortable with most of these already. Now to show you this, I want to make a new fill layer. And we're just going to run through some of the PBR properties. So we'll kind of come back to this in just a second. So just kind of above all these guys, like outside of their folders, make a brand new fill layer. So just something completely new. So this is a new fill layer, which is that button right at the top. Let's go a little paint bucket. And you can see it kind of coats everything, right? Like it's covering everything. This, like, for all purposes, this is a material. It's a really boring looking material, but that is a material. This is very, very similar to you just making like a gray Lambert in Maya. And obviously we would assign textures and things to it. Now, every time you make a new PBR material, which is basically like a fill layer, you've noticed that they always have the same properties, right? Color, height, roughness, metallic, and normal. I know you all know what color means, right? That's like your basic texture color. So you go in there, you change it, the color changes to whatever you want, and obviously you could put a texture on here if you wanted to. Now, like because we're doing a fill layer, you actually can drag individual textures to all these guys. Because you'll see how the base color, height, and roughness are all like little boxes you can click on. You can pick stuff from here. So like if you had like a random image online that you maybe downloaded, like a poster you wanted to use, if you bring this into Painter and you have a fill layer set up, you can drag that right here and it will show up on the model. Yeah, question.
What would you import it as?
Like the file type?
Yep.
You can really whatever you want. PNG is usually pretty good.
No, I mean as in like would you import it as an alpha environment?
Oh yeah, that's kind of up to you. Like anytime you bring in a resource, like let me actually, I'll pick one right now. I'll show you guys. Let me just find like a random photo. Where is it? Perfect. Okay, so I'm bringing in this terrible image, and here is kind of where you're wondering like where you assign it. If usually the way I kind of think of this is anytime I'm doing a black and white texture, like a brush effect, or like if you're doing like a stencil, like you want to have a like a mask to hide something, I typically put those under alphas. Environments would be your like HDR images, your EXR files, like whatever you're using for the lighting. A colored image, which is kind of what we're talking about now, I would put that under texture. So I'm going to do that, and I'll maybe say, I guess for a current session is fine. We'll import it. And under the textures now, it's already there. This is going to look really stupid. That's me photoshopped on someone wearing Jinko jeans. We're going to throw this on the base color.
I choose to believe that picture is real.
Yep. Where am I? Oh, there I am. Snazzy. So now, like, my color image is on there. And you could put your own height detail. So if I wanted to go in there and change the height, perfect. This is the best example. If I went into like my procedurals, and there's like a ton of different like pre-built sort of procedurals you can use, like bricks, circles. I can take bricks. If I drag bricks to height, it's now affecting height. Like it's a completely different texture, but that is now impacting how that material is acting for height, which is going to be like your bump, your normal data, all the same thing. And this one, because it's a procedural, does have extra controls you can do. You can tell on like the base color, there's not really a whole lot you can do to it. It's kind of like it's just there and that's it. And I can do the same thing for roughness. Like so what is like a roughness property? Like how would you guys describe roughness? We kind of did talk about this like a little bit.
Dirty plastic.
Yeah. So it's sort of like defining how smooth the surface is going to be. So like, yeah, like if it's really low roughness, it's very sharp and shiny. Like I guess the whiteboard is kind of like that right now. Like the floor out in the hallway would be sort of like that. You know, maybe your laptop screen. But like the carpet in here would be very, very high roughness. But if I want to do, like, I could break up the roughness with a texture. So I'm just going to grab some other procedural in here. I don't know what. We'll do grunge map 007. I'm going to drag that to roughness. And this one's a little harder to see. But if I move, I'm doing shift right click. You can kind of see how there's like a wet spot right there where there's like a lower roughness. Okay, so that's now changing the way the reflection looks. And the last one, we're not going to worry about normal, because normal just sort of works automatically with height. But the other one here is going to be metallic. And this one is usually set to 0. The only time you're going to have a metallic setting cranked up is if you're doing a actual metallic object. Because gold, like for instance, let's say we were doing gold. I'm just going to remove like height completely. I'll remove my image. Get rid of that. Let me fix the height blend mode just for a second. Okay. So I have kind of like a really flat material. Okay, and I'm going to play around with the metallic property. You can see how this kind of works. So if we have like no base color at all, like let's say we're black, if I bring in metallic, you'll see how it eventually kind of shuts off almost completely. It's basing the metallic information on the color. Because if you're doing something like a gold or like a plastic marble, like let's say there's a marble that's a gold color, but it's still made of plastic, that would mean the base color is maybe set to a gold. I'll pick something kind of relatively close, like that. So see how this kind of looks like it's a gold, like a plastic effect? Because it's a gold color, but the highlight and reflection still is white, right? It's reflecting like a normal object. But as soon as you bring metallic up, it feels like metal, like almost immediately. Because metals aren't just a gold color, they reflect gold light back to you. So the highlight itself is tinted that tone. So when you have metallic cranked up, whatever you do to the base color is going to affect the reflection color. The more saturated, the richer the color. And now I'm just kind of going through all sorts of different anodized metals. And I can find copper. A lot of this stuff are also built into RenderMan as presets. And obviously this painter has a ton of different materials where you can pull metals that just look correct from the beginning, like copper right there, and you can apply those. So everything we're doing right now, we're not going to worry about metallic, but we are going to use that next week. So I mean, overall, like, do you guys feel pretty good about like what the material properties are doing? You guys have any questions about like any of those guys? Base color, height, roughness, or metallic? Okay, let me get rid of this. So back to these guys. There we go. Okay, I'm going to bring in a couple new resources here. Like we're going to try adding some breakup to the wood. Now, let's say we want to do cracks for the wood. Okay, now obviously like last time, we were just jumping into the procedurals and we were kind of just seeing like what might work. So let me try doing a search for cracks. Crack. And I'm going to put my mouse over the icon. That's plaster. I don't think that's going to look too good. Maybe it would. This is concrete cracked. You can tell I'm really limited on my crack detail. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to kind of scroll down and see if anything else happens to jump out. These are all like just kind of interesting patterns. And I suppose you guys could try using some of these for the wallpaper. Like if you want to build it yourself, you know, manually. Some pretty cool ones in here. But if I kind of keep scrolling, there was one I found in here that does tend to work relatively well. I've got to find it again. It is, I think it's a grunge. Oh, there it is. So it's actually a grunge map. This is grunge map 005. But I want to show you some cracked wood so you can kind of see what this does. So I'm looking for something almost like this, where there's like that horizontal splintering. And the other cracked procedurals we were finding weren't really doing that. It was a completely different surface type. But this guy right here is actually kind of close to what it's doing. It's a grunge map, but it looks really, really similar. So let me try using that on the wood to apply crack detail. Now, when you guys start thinking about like a texture or material effect that you're going to apply, when you think of the material properties, where would cracks fall under here? Like what one of these guys would be defined as like cracks in the wood? Height, right? Would there be anything else you could think of that those cracks would affect? Good. Well, thankfully, normal will be automatically generated from the height, so we don't really have to worry about that guy too much. It just kind of happens. Maybe now, what about the base color? Do you think would be different with the cracks?
Because it's like revealing you like love the material, so you like.
So maybe if there was a stain on the wood and it was cracked, you might be seeing the undercoat of the wood but beneath like a stain effect. Or there could be like in the cracks, that's where the dirt has settled in. So maybe it's darker in the crevices. And if it's maybe it's drier in there, maybe the clear coat or like the finish is really shiny, but underneath that shininess, there's like that rough raw wood. So what I'm going to do is maybe start with height because that's kind of the big one, and we might change this to some of the other guys. Now, the first thing we want to do is define what material we're going to put this on. I want it for the wood. So I'm going to go in the wood group. We're going to make a fill layer again. Oh, this popped out of the group. Let me put this back in here. And I want to make sure this is above the wood material. So it's still in the wood group, but it is on top of the wood material. But I want to make sure it's in the group so it doesn't appear on the little metal pieces. And we'll call this crack height, or we'll just call it crack details, I guess. Now, when we make a new fill layer, again, it starts with all these properties. I'm going to turn off everything except for height. And we can always turn these on later. So we'll just keep only the height on the fill layer. And I'm going to go to the procedurals. We're going to take grunge map 005, and we're going to drag it over here to that height. Now watch what happens when I drag it on the height. Like it's working, right? You can tell it's doing something, but when you just drag it over here like this, what you're doing is you're essentially relying on the procedural's values to just affect sort of the way the height looks. Like I'm hitting C to toggle over to the height. This is okay to do it this way, but I think usually what you guys are going to want to do is instead of just dropping it on like the height, dropping it on the base color, Oh, that all turned on again. Turn that off. I think it's going to be better for us to apply this as a mask instead. That way we can just move that height slider up and down to determine like how high or low we want those cracks to be. So to apply it as a mask on that crack layer, the fill layer, we're going to go up here, we're going to make a black mask for it. And then on the mask, this time we're going to do a fill. So fill is just going to cover everything. Like all the wood is going to have cracks. I don't need to hand paint this. So we're going to make a fill for that black mask. This on the fill is where we're going to drag to procedural, because I'm treating this more of like an alpha instead of it just being a texture we're throwing on it. Grunge map, go into the grayscale value of the fill, and it doesn't look like anything's happened. You guys remember the little shortcut to see the mask if you ever want to view it on the model? Yeah. We'll see, actually, we'll eventually get to it if you kind of toggle through it enough. If you want a shortcut to immediately hop to the mask, if you hold Option down and click on the mask, that will force it to show up. And if you hit M, you'll go back to material. So on this guy, like, I know this is applied. Now, I'm not really too crazy with the way that crack stuff is going to look, because they're huge right now. And I kind of want to get mine to be horizontal, I think. So on that fill layer, we have controls for that, right? I can scale it, I can rotate it. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. We'll keep turning it. I can actually just type in 90. So we're flipping it horizontally. These are still massive. So I'm also going to scale this up to bring the kind of the pattern down a lot smaller. Okay, right here, see that kind of nasty seam forming, right? That is where, if you notice that and it looks like it's going to bother you, you can change this from UV projection to triplanar. And I'm on the grunge, that fill layer, or the fill effect rather. UV projection to triplanar. This one's actually having a hard time. It might work if I play with the blend. You can kind of see how it's trying to kind of blur those two areas together with mixed results on that. I'm playing with the hardness. I'm just going to keep that all the way down. I think I will leave this triplanar. Okay. Let's go back here to the material. And now that I think I have like an okay mask, I'm going to then drop the height down. Now there's a weird thing kind of happening. So I'm back on the fill layer and I have that height slider. I'm lowering it down, but look what's happening. Doesn't that kind of look like the cracks are going up? So I'm on the fill layer. I'm moving height down. They should push down, and these look like they're going up. The reason it's doing that is because when I applied it as a mask, remember how white is visible? White is where you're affecting it with a mask. Black is where you're not affecting it. Look at the pattern again. The cracks are the black part. So actually what's happening right now is we're modifying the other areas, not the cracked part. Now thankfully we can fix that, because if you look at that little fill effect we did, there is an invert button right there built into it. So if I hit invert, that will flip it. And maybe what I'll do as well is I could play around with like the balance. If I want to like pull these back a little bit, exaggerate the contrast and get like harsher pockets. And let me come back to the color part of that layer again. Now when I drag the height down, it's pushing in. So we kind of have these interesting little weathered patterns forming on the material. And I know before we were talking about there maybe being color adjustments, right? Maybe it's going to be darker in that area. Maybe there's like a different roughness. Once this is set up, you can then simply turn on color. You can see that looks great. Kind of cool looking, actually. It's putting gray color in the cracks. What should be happening to the wood's color? Like if you did want to change it in the crack. Probably should be darker, right? Now, if you go in there and just pick black, like I mean, it's kind of working, but that's not really what we want. I just don't want to pick a color in there because that looks like paint, right? I'm trying to make the texture behind it darker. The way to do that is when you pick, like, let's say a gray value, instead of leaving it as a normal blend mode, which is acting like paint, it's just covering the wood. I had a couple of you guys do this before, but you change this base color layer to multiply. Multiplication will darken what's beneath it. This is actually the same thing you were kind of babbling, Steve, the other day. It's multiplication. So if I put it to multiply, if you kind of look at the colored part, it's actually the same texture, it's just darker. So once this is set to multiply, if you go back to those properties for the base color, changing the value of that is almost like you darkening the wood texture behind it. If it's at white, anything times, you know how white is the number 1? Like 0 is black. Anything times 1, like multiplication, is itself. It doesn't change. Anything times 0 is 0, right? You turn it off. So that's basically how multiplies work. So I can maybe leave it to something like that. And now once you kind of get a color in there, obviously you can go back to procedural, play around with the scale and figure out if you like it or not. And maybe I'll do the same thing for roughness. We'll go in there and I'll go to that material, turn on roughness, and I don't know. We'll say it's a lot rougher in that area. Can't really see much of that anyway, because I think the wood's already rough, but it's there. So that's using like a fill layer with a procedural. Now we're going to do the same thing, because let's say that these cracks just seem a little too like artificial, and they do kind of look like that. This almost feels like kind of stylized, like Blizzard kind of texture, like World of Warcraft. So I'm going to find another photo and try to get another layer in here to add a bit more realistic breakup. So what I'm going to do this time is go online. We're going to look for something like this that I can use inside of Painter. Now, you kind of want to think about the direction the cracks are going to go. Like these are not a good idea because that's just going to spiral out from the middle and look kind of ridiculous. All mine are horizontal. So I want to find something that would possibly work for that. Like this guy is not too bad. And there's a couple other ones popping up under related images. Some do not look great. This one might work though. So I'm going to try using this. I'm just doing like an image search for like cracked wood. I don't think there's any. That one's the same thing again. See any other ones you guys like? A lot of these are kind of the wrong angle. It's like a stump. Yeah, that one would be cool if it was bigger. I think we might go with what we had. And this one, while it does look cool, it might be difficult to convert that to a black and white image because it's so flat and neutral. Let me see if any of these other ones might work. Maybe that one's kind of cool. I'm going to stick with that black and white one, I think, in this case. We'll go back up. All right, so where are we going here? Perfect. We're going to download that. That actually downloading?
I think it was gonna be that easy.
There we go. Glad I paid for that. Okay. Thank you, stock photo. So I have now downloaded that image. So I've got this photo, and obviously you can go in there. If you have like another nice piece of wood, you can kind of find something else that works a little bit better. But this feels a little more natural to me than like that procedurally generated one. I don't think I have to do a whole lot of modifying to this one, but you know how before when I was doing this kind of cracked effect, like the cracks are the white part. That's what I'm trying to affect. Isn't this kind of backwards again, where it's like the inverse of what I kind of want to use? So sometimes what you need to do is adjust these before you bring them into Painter. And I know we're not really using Photoshop a whole lot this month, but I mean, most of you guys probably feel fairly comfortable with Photoshop, at least like blend modes and kind of how to navigate. This is not going to be a whole lot of work. The big thing with this is because I want to have it inverted to look like a nice alpha, I can just simply invert the values. Like if that layer is set up, just Command-I, invert it. Now from here, is it going to look okay? I think it'd be fine. I can tell there's a little bit of a weird tint of color up here. So I could like desaturate it, use like an HSV adjustment. And after that, it's really just figuring out like, am I happy with all the grain? Like if I do like you guys know how the levels works. You've probably used that before. Levels would like clip out sections. So I could, if I crank the contrast up with levels, I could do a much harsher crack effect. Or if you like all the little pot marks and everything, you could leave it. I think I'm going to leave it and to see what it looks like. But eventually when you get to that point when you're ready to see it, we're just going to take this image, file, we're going to save it out of Photoshop, and I'm going to put this in the same directory that my painter project's in. So you know how we have that whole folder set up, because this is all related to it. Not only is the FBX file there, we're also going to drop in this texture. I'm going to just do a PNG. We'll call this crack alpha. Save. We'll get out of Photoshop. Now back here, I want to import this and just try it out and see what happens. So to import a resource, down here on the shelf, there's that button right there. Import resource. We're going to hit it. This is going to pop up. Add resources. And I'm going to go find that in the directory. So lecture project, painter, there it is, crack alpha, open, and now we have to decide like, did it even work? Try it again. That doesn't feel good. Hold on a second. I wonder if that is not, I think it's missing the extension. That better not be a PSD. I don't think so. It's only 730 kilobytes. I think it's the missing extension might have been it. Let me try this again. It didn't have the .png on there. See if that changes it. Yep, that was it. So I've got this guy. This is going to be an alpha. So I'm going to put this from undefined to alpha. Import to this particular project. Or this current session if you don't want to see it the next time you open Painter. And import. Okay, there it is. It comes in as the same name as whatever you saved it as. So just kind of be careful about that. So if you're not sure where this guy's located, if you put it under the alpha section, just look for the same name as your file. It's still called crack alpha. Now, in this case, I want to add it to this guy because I don't want to remove the other one. I'm just trying to layer in additional photo details. So I'm going to do a fill layer again. So what we're going to do is go to that mask for the cracks. So the same fill layer. Let's add a fill effect to it. Now when I did that, this covered the previous one, right? So I just lost the previous cracks. Now they're still there because if you turn the visibility off, you can see it's hidden behind this gray color. Just like we did with the procedural, I'm going to drag this photo to this. You can tell, bam, it's there. Now these are humongous at the moment. So let's kind of go up, and I'm going to change the scale. Now this one is kind of weird because it has a really bad seam in it. So what I'm going to do is see if the triplanar kind of works if I scale it the right way. This might be good enough. I'm not going to get too much into fixing those seams inside of Photoshop. Do you guys remember how to do that? Because I think you did it with Tony. Like if you had like a photo, did you guys ever do the offset in Photoshop and try to clone stamp the seams to make it tile forever?
Yeah.
Oh, like a brick wall, yeah. I could do that. What's that? Yeah. Say it one more time, sorry. Yeah, seamless, right, yeah. There's a bunch of videos on that out there. One thing I could do that would really help quite a bit is, you know how I'm basically applying this whole thing to the entire wooden pulley? What I could do is try to isolate this so it's only on one section at a time, and then possibly clone stamp to blend it. But I'm just going to kind of leave this the way it is right now because you guys are not going to have to worry about this with the wall. I just want you guys to kind of see how these images blend. Actually, let me try scaling it a little bit. And I'm going to take the repeat off. Because right now it's tiling automatically. There is a repeat option on this thing that we can fix. Let's go back to UV, repeat, none. You'll see how it's like right there in the middle. It's one image. It's not trying to tile. And I'm just going to move it over. And we're just going to get it on the front part. And I'm moving it up. Perfect. It's a little touchy. There we go. We'll try that. All right, that should be fine. So let's try to blend these guys together. So it's covering it. What should this result look like if I wanted to compile these into one sort of image? Let me try going through my different blend modes. Like normal's covering it. What does multiply do? Yeah, it's going to make it darker, right? That's not helping. Yeah, I can add it or I can do max. Max and min are really useful. So if you do max on that fill layer with the new texture, look what that does when I turn it on and off. So max will almost take like the whites of both layers and add them together, or sort of finds the max value, and then we get a new texture where all the whites between both of those guys are showing up. Let me check it out. I now have additional crack details built into this thing. And again, because you have controls over all the opacity, you could decide you want to fade one of them, like maybe want to fade this guy out. Maybe this guy gets faded a little bit. I can control that. You could find more photos. I could even take another crack procedural, like one of the concrete ones or stucco, try to blend that in there for even more and more details. But it's getting there. All right. And we're also going to do a couple other things here. So this is just height. It's okay. I also want to do some like discoloration. We're going to maybe break up, we'll do some like staining effects, possibly get some like drip details from the rust where it feels like the metal has kind of affected some of the wood around it. So if I wanted to do, let's say like a green, kind of like a mildew, like a stain is kind of building up, like it's been at sea, you kind of get that mossy sort of green coloring. What material properties would be used for that? Like if I do like another fill layer. Yeah, I could do like a grunge map to break it up, get a cool pattern. What properties would make up like a kind of a mossy material? Color for sure, right? Definitely color. Roughness, if it's wet, that'd be kind of nice to get some like slight shininess to it. Maybe height, depending on how thick it is. But if it's like, you know how wood is absorbent? Like liquid soaks into wood, it's porous. If you feel like the liquid should look like it's soaked into the material, I would probably skip height, because as soon as you turn height on, it's going to look like green paint is on top of the wood. I think I want to have it soak into it. So I'm going to keep height off. No metallic, no normal. We'll stick with just color and roughness. Now the first thing I'm going to do on this new fill layer, and I'll name it, we'll call it a green stain, I guess. Let's pick the color. And I'll just pick whatever color I think this needs to be. We'll just find like kind of a greenish. Yeah, beautiful. This has never been more realistic, right? So I'm picking a color for what I think would work. Maybe I'll go like darker and more desaturated. But it's covering the wood. What happens when you have a stain with something porous? Like if you had like a bottle of wine, if you spill it on a shirt, it pushes through into the shirt's color, right? It's not covering the shirt. It absorbs into the shirt, and it's almost like how like ink will work, how it stains something and changes the tone. This is where multiplication, again, comes in. If I have that green fill layer set to multiply instead of normal, see what's happening? Let me fade it out a little bit. It's staining the wood behind it. It's not just covering it, it's tinting it. So I'm going to maybe fade down the opacity a little bit on the green so it's not as intense. Something like this. Roughness might be okay. We'll kind of leave it like that so it's kind of wet. But I need to break it up with another procedural, right? So it looks a little more natural. So let's do this again. go to this fill layer, add a black mask. It disappeared. We've seen that happen a lot. And just like we did earlier, we're going to add a fill effect to the mask. And now let's just find some cool procedural that might look like a staining effect. For this guy? So the reason I'm not doing a folder here is because, I mean, you could, actually, if you wanted to. I usually do folders anytime I'm doing a separate material. So you know how, like, everything we're doing is all part of the wood? So that, to me, like, the staining of the wood is still part of the wood. So I'm kind of keeping that within the same wood folder. But as far as, like, if it's easier for you guys to think of everything needing a folder, if that's the way you work, I could totally do the same thing and make a folder for this guy and then put the mask on the folder. So it's that you actually would get the exact same result. It really just comes down to how you guys like to organize your painter project.
Is that any different than just creating another fill layer and then adding effects to it and just having them stacked? Is it just for the sake of being able to compact them into like one line, or
Basically, yeah.
just organization?
Yes, it all comes down to organization. And like when some of you guys, I know a couple of you guys watched that the Subster Painter one from Logarithmic, the little lantern. When you look at his document, the way his is set up, his looks even different than mine. Like he has like fill layers out of groups. He's got clone layers. To me, I kind of have a certain method I have where I always keep groups as a material. And anytime I have a material within that, I just have a bunch of fill layers and how to affect that material. But if you want to have folders within folders, there's nothing stopping you. But let me try going to this little fill layer we set up on that green mask. And which one would look good? Do you guys have one you kind of like? Let's see. Which one?
Down to the right.
That one? That guy? Yeah, let's try that guy. Grunge Math 14, love it. We're going to put it to the grayscale box, and you can already tell we're getting something in there. Now, this again is based on where it's white, right? As you can see, it's kind of in the middle. You could start just like clicking on that guy. Here's that random button. Let's see if this guy has a random seed. It does. I can just hit this until I get like another variation of that pattern I like. And you guys all kind of know what random seeds are. If you've ever done like something like Minecraft, you know what random seeds are. Like Minecraft, every time you make a new world, they're all randomized seeds. This got really dorky, and I'm sorry. We'll maybe do like that. That one's kind of cool.
Any way to, how do I say, like save one and then continue looking at if you don't find any others that you like, go back to the one that you had? I mean,
yeah, like if you, let's say you set one up and you're like not sure if you're sold on it, you want to try a different one,
right.
Absolutely, and I'll show you how to do that. So it's a good question. So let's say you've got one built, and I'll maybe just push this a little more. We'll kind of maybe exaggerate the contrast a bit. So maybe I have something like this. I'm like, I don't know if I'm really feeling it. Remember how before I did another fill effect, it covered the previous one as soon as you make a new one? You could do it that way. You could say, all right, this is okay. It's not bad, I guess, but we'll try a different one. I'll go in here, do a new fill effect, and we'll just try a different procedural. We'll try, let's go up here a little bit. We'll do number 1, grunge map 001. So this is now covering it. And if you see how when I turn the visibility off, I can even compare them. So now I can like, do I like this better? I can hit a option to click on it. I can kind of compare the two visually. Or I could mix them, right? You can start mixing like a bunch of procedurals together. I could just start going through these like trial and error and to see if anything looks cool. Like, I don't know, does overlay look nice? Yeah, basically. Like here's a mult. Like now I'm like multiplying that with the other one. So instead of it being flat white, there's like other tones built in the white area. And now like there's more breakup in there. So there's no limit to how many of these guys you stack. But you can totally make different fill layers and then delete it, you know, if you don't like the previous one. So there's that. All right. So you guys all feel pretty comfortable with that stuff so far? Let's do this other guy. I think I'm kind of okay with this one. I'm going to go to the box. So we'll say we're kind of done with him for now. So I'm going to go turn the box's visibility on. I'm in the texture set list. So you can see there it is. There's nothing on it yet. We're then going to click on the box texture set. And you can see as soon as I do that, all the layers are different, right? It's a new material. Blank canvas. We're going to look for cardboard. Okay, so I'm going to go down to my materials. Let's just see if we get lucky. Nope, no cardboard. Wonderful. What else could possibly work for cardboard?
It seemed like they had nothing paper skin.
Yeah, there's a lot of, but there's if you go on Substance Share or Substance Source, there are hundreds of other materials, and a lot of those are free. You can download other ones. I would like to see you guys try to manipulate these as much as possible, just for the practice. But if you do find something on like Substance Share that's like free, and you just want to run it by one of us, I'm still open to that. But I think it'd be good for you guys to try manipulating this because it builds a lot of good practice and repetition. But let me see. What's for smart? Which one?
No, scavenge one.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Let's try doing. Yeah. This one right here, good old leather rough. We've come back to this again. I use this a lot. But we can manipulate it. So I'm just going to grab leather rough and we'll drag it over here. And we'll get rid of this other empty layer since we don't need it. And let's just make the folder. We'll call this cardboard group. Move this in the folder. Okay, so does it look like cardboard? Nah, I mean, it's a little busy. It looks pretty beat up for cardboard, but maybe that has options. So if I click on the material, what do we got? I have like these weird stain sliders. Let me just try bringing all these back and see what does it look like without any of it. Actually, that's not bad. So this one just happened to have some stuff to like add in these other like imperfections that make it look like leather. So I could maybe keep it kind of more subtle, and it's okay. You can, so this gets into a whole other topic, but yes, you can actually make your own custom materials. You guys, has anyone ever used Designer before, Substance Designer? Okay. I ideally sometime down the road, Shane and I have talked about this quite a bit. We want to get Designer somehow in this class, or even have like just elective Designer courses that we just offer to students, like on the off days. Designer is a sort of like a procedural material editor. It almost looks like the Hypershade, where you just connect nodes together. But you could actually build a material like this in Designer, and because you're exporting it for Painter, you get to pick what parameters are available. So if you had something, like if you're doing a wood material, if I build it right in Designer, I could set up like the amount of rings and weathering and stains, and I could put paint splatters on it in Designer and have a paint splatter slider. It just happens to be that this is sort of what they're built with. But if you go on like Substance Share or Source and you get another material, you might find a couple that other artists have done that have like a bunch of other cool parameters in there. But yeah, you're sort of stuck with whatever you're sort of given. But down the road, you could like make your own materials if you want, and then. Oh, if we could do that, you totally could. Yep. And thankfully too, something like Scratches is easy. So I could actually go into the procedurals, and if I just do a search for like Scratch, you actually see there's a bunch of awesome procedurals in here that you could maybe use to really, like that right there is kind of nice. You could probably layer these in there and just avoid the headache of like making a whole new Scratch material from scratch. A Scratch material from scratch.
Well, what you can do, say you have that wood completely finished and you like that wood and you might want to put it on something else. You can put it all into a folder, right click on it, and do Create Smart Material. It won't save your selections, so you might as well take the metal out of it. But you can apply that wood to anything just with a click and drag. It'll detect everything.
Yeah, I'll show you guys that real quick. What he's talking about is if let's say, back here on this guy, you really like what you did with just the wood material, and you just want to reuse that for something else. Okay, so we're going to click on this, right click, and we're going to do create smart material. I'm just right clicking on that folder. That's the whole material though, right, for the wood. Smart material. Under smart materials, look what's appeared. That's my material. Like, that's the wood thing. I just built that. So now it's going to look really weird. But we're going to go to the box. And I'm going to put the smart material on the box. This is going to be a bad decision. But there it is. It looks kind of dopey because I was using the selections to kind of like control where it was visible. So you can tell there's some masking issues. It's missing half the box. But I could just redo the mask and fix that. Like, it's not on most of the box because I saved it with a mask on it. I right-clicked on the group or the folder that has all the stuff in it because that's kind of your material. You right-click and do Create Smart Material. And that'll appear under Smart Materials, and then you can just drag it and put it on any other object you want. That's a really good way to like duplicate stuff. If you have like a lot of objects that are reusing the same thing, you don't have to always build it from scratch.
I had a general question.
Yeah.
Are we going to be getting into the emissive materials?
We probably won't, but if you guys, like if I ever have like a part of lab where it's pretty easy and you guys want me to cover something like emissive materials, I can totally do that. Emissive materials would be like a texture that's a light source, like your laptop screen is an emissive material right now. Or like a control panel where there's a bunch of light up buttons.
I was wondering if it's something that is either powered or something that has like its own light source. You know what I mean? Like a globe with a candle inside would be considered like an emissive material.
Yeah, that would be. You could do it that way. You can. There are ways to add those properties. This is again jumping a little bit ahead, but if you ever are doing a material that doesn't quite have all the properties, like let's say you're missing something, like we're doing the PBR preset. There's only so much you can do with that. Emissive is a completely different material property. If we were doing glass, I need like an opacity option, right, to see through the glass. You'll kind of notice like in that same area where we did the bake. Oh, I didn't even bake the mesh maps for this guy. That's why it looked weird. Oops. Let me bake that real quick. That was probably why that other smart material didn't work. But you can add your own channel. So instead of it just being base color, height, roughness, metallic, normal, if you hit the plus in the top right, there is your emissive. And you could build an emissive channel. I was using it before with using custom outputs. Like you can actually build a black and white alpha in Painter and force that to export. So if you wanted to make like maybe you made a cool black and white alpha for like a tattoo and you want to manipulate that somehow in Maya, there's ways to output like almost anything you're doing in Painter as a separate map that you could use inside of Maya. Like emissive, whatever. So with the box here, I'm going to show you guys a couple tricks on how to get some interesting staining, but we're going to do some more like directional control. I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit. I'm going to make a kind of an overall stain group like we did for the wood. So we're going to do a new fill layer. I'm going to do a staining effect. So we're going to have color and probably roughness again. And we're going to, on that fill layer, we're going to do a black mask. And then on the mask, we'll do add fill. And let me just find a procedural that will work again. We'll try grunge map 15. I don't know. Put that on there. Actually kind of looks like white paint. Let's go over here. And I'll, again, like before, we'll put this to a molt. And I'm going to bring that down. So I'm kind of multiplying this dark color based on this procedural. Not bad. I'll hit random, maybe get something a little bit different. And we'll also try doing triplanar. That kind of helped remove some of the seams, kind of like that. So I've just kind of got this overall staining on it. Now, if I wanted to have this thing fade to the top, so instead of it being just an overall blanket of this thing everywhere, what if I want it to be more isolated to the bottom of the box, right? So it's like it was sitting in like dirt or a puddle. I don't want it to be as dirty on the top. What needs to happen to the mask in order to do that? Like, what should be different with this if I don't want the dirt on the top of the box? Like, visually, when you think of what the mask should look like, what needs to...
Mostly black on top and gradually white to the bottom.
Right. There's like a gradient, right? It should be going to a darker color at the top. There shouldn't be any of that even up there. Say it again? Yes. The light generator would work. We could also just do ramps and gradients to do that. I'll try the light one out because that's kind of an interesting one. So what I'm going to do is leave this the way it is. I'm going to click on the mask. We're going to go up here. I'm going to do a generator. We'll try out the light one. The light generator is pretty slick. If you hit generator and you bring this up, before we were doing the metal edge wear, some of you guys may have tried the dirt one, the other day. Well, this is the one we did on Wednesday. This is the light one. And you'll kind of understand what it is when you see it. Doesn't that kind of look like it's being hit with a light? Like that's in shadow? When you do a light generator, you're actually creating an alpha based on light direction. I use this all the time when I'm doing dust that settles on something from the top. I can actually rotate the angle of the light generator to look like it's coming from the top. And there's a little bit of options for like attenuation. This one's a little weird because it is sort of being occluded. But if you play with the glossiness, you can kind of force that to bleed down the side.
So how's that different than this material?
This isn't an emissive material. This is actually just like, it's a generator that's basically just making like a white alpha based on a light angle. So an emissive material is like a light source. This is a light trick to make like a different type of an alpha. Yeah, that's not confusing.
Sounds like potato top.
Yeah, they are very different. But if I do a light one like this, it's covering it. If I change this to multiply, you can kind of see it's backwards. Let me invert the light. And I might be able to get this to work. The light one's a little tricky with cubes like this. Yeah, it's got mixed results. Yeah, the light one's probably not going to work too well. I'm going to show you like another one that's really slick. Since like the light was having a little bit of an issue, like making a gradient. There's one I was using before, which uses the position map of the object. So I'm going to do this mask again. We're going to go up to Effect, to a Generator. We're going to hit Generator. Now I'm going to pick 3D Linear Gradient. Because this one looks like what I want it to do. It is a gradient, but it's based in 3D space. This one's pretty cool. If I hit it, you'll see like something happened. Like what is it doing? Let me click on it. It's this very strange looking like a grayish gradient kind of going from the bottom to the top. And at first I didn't really know what this was, but when I looked at the controls for the 3D linear gradient, I saw these weird colors. Like those are kind of very odd colors. What the hell does that mean? When I go through my mesh maps, it's actually feeding off of this guy. Because we know how we built a position map way earlier on. It's one of the first things we baked. Watch this. If you hit, what I'm doing is I'm hitting B to eventually get to the position. And it wants to know for the start and end point for the 3D linear gradient. If I click where it's purple and color sample the bottom of the box, go to the green, color sample the top of the box, and then go back to, look what happened. It's making a gradient between the 2 points that I color selected. And I could also invert it. And if I put this to multiply, it's fading that out as it goes to the top. That's a little more advanced because the little linear thing is kind of tricky. But basically all I did is on the start and end points, I hit B until I find the position. And you just color sample the 2 points. Think of it like you picking the 2 areas on a gradient that you're trying to make it go between, like bottom of the box to the top of the box. If you wanted to go horizontally across the wall, you color sample from the 2 points on the wall, left and right. It's just a giant 3-dimensional gradient. This could be really useful though, if you're doing something like, let's do like tape. I'll show you how we can do tape with the same trick. So this can be a little more complicated. Tape is a different type of material. It should be something shiny on the box that lifts up barely off the cardboard. So I'm going to make, for this I am going to do a new folder just in case it gets a little more complicated than I needed. I'm going to call this tape group. And I'm going to put a fill layer inside of here for what the tape material should be. So if you're putting tape on a box, what material properties would make up tape? Height. If it's transparent tape, like packaging tape, maybe not, right? Because you want to see the cardboard beneath it. Roughness. I think between roughness and height, we can get a pretty good looking result. Okay, so I have a fill layer, only doing roughness and height. Now I want to control where we're seeing that, because right now you can see this is covering the whole box. I want to have like a packaging tape that's coming across right through here that wraps around the whole box. I can do that by adding a black mask to the group. And I'm going to make a generator on the mask. And just like I did before, I'm going to do the 3D linear gradient. That's what it looks like. I'm going to go to my position. And this time, because I'm trying to get a piece of tape that wraps around it, I need to make like almost like a line that kind of goes from here to here, but around the box. So in the 3D linear gradient, we're going to click on it, 3D start position, click on the purple, color sample one side of the box, click on the green, hit the little color sampler, hit the other side of the box, and let's look at it. It's doing a gradient from one side to the other. And I'm trying to make like a piece of tape in the middle. Okay, so let's see here. Do I have any other controls? I'm going to move up the balance and contrast. I'm moving contrast up. I'm kind of trying to make this be the tape eventually. So I'm kind of getting the width. I'm going to move the balance and just shift it over a little bit. Mine is crooked, but maybe that's natural. We'll do like that. So this is kind of where the tape's going to be. Now I want this to be the white spot. There's a gradient there. We're going to go up here. This time I'm going to go into filter. Filters, I did bring this up at one point in the last lecture. A filter, if you make one, these are sort of where you can do these very random color adjustments. Like if you ever want to just change the color of something, like you know how you have like hue saturation value, you could use a fill effect, a filter, and pick like HSL perceptive. One that's kind of handy is this one called gradient. If I do a gradient filter above that line, we did the linear gradient, it's trying to convert that gradient to like a new set of values, and I'm going to have it be black on this side, black on that side. That's 0.3. Black. Oops. What was it? Here we go. White. Let me play with the position. This gradient is kind of interesting because I'm turning this into this. And the last thing I'm missing, let me save this before I even do this. Oh boy. Here we go, Shane. We're picking levels. This is like my one weakness with Painter. This crashes a lot. Is it cool? Oh man, it worked. It's amazing. I'm just doing like levels in Photoshop. But see how I'm like turning that into like a strip? It took like a few steps. Let's move that. That's not black. There we go. That's a piece of tape. Let's go back here at M. It's actually kind of working. It's kind of interesting. Now, on the fill layer, we want the tape to lift up a little bit, right? So take the height, try to boost that up just a little bit. And I can also play around with the roughness. I want to keep that down. And it's also kind of interesting because you can see it's picking up the sort of the texture of the cardboard beneath it. Probably have the height even cranked up too much. But it's picking up the bump beneath it. If you didn't want the cardboard's bumpiness to go through, do you guys remember what the issue is with that?
The roughness is standardized to blend with each
Yeah, so the height is blending. Yes, right. So most of the time when you're doing layers, they always cover the one beneath it. Height is one of those rare cases where height doesn't always cover the one beneath it, because you can tell something's happening with the cardboard showing up. If you at the top of the layers, if you go to the height material properties, most of them, like on base color, say normal. Height, you'll notice, is not doing that. It's set to linear dodge. If I take this tape group and put it back to normal, it now looks like smooth tape on the cardboard. Now, I do want maybe some bumpiness. When you put tape on cardboard, there is some of that stuff that should come through. So I could leave it on normal, but then maybe just like fade out the opacity a little bit. So it's like somewhat showing through, but it's not completely bumpy. Like if you want to have little folds on it too, like where it's kind of like it's not been applied properly. Yeah, we could do that. So like when you think of the crease, because you're thinking of it when you put tape together, it gets those little pinches where it makes like a line that's kind of sticking up. What I would do, this is actually a good question, is I'd go to the procedural and first just figure out, is there something that looks like randomized lines? If I do line, that's too perfect. Let's do scratches. I think we could use this to fake it. So what should happen to the height on the crease? Like it goes up, right? I could do that with a fill layer. I could say, let me add a layer to this thing above the tape, but I'm only going to affect height. Height only. I'm going to add a mask to the fill layer. This is only a height adjustment. I'm going to put a fill on it and just drag this random scratch thing to the fill. So it looks like this. Let me just play around with the scale just for a second. We'll do something like that. And I'm going to go to the procedural, and I think, oh, this has a lot of controls. Holy smokes. Oh, boy. Yeah, we're not going to have that many scratches. Let's like pull that back and just get a couple interesting ones. Like maybe this. So we should have some random kind of folds and creases in it. Back here, I think if I go to that fill layer and simply raise the height up, it should, oh, there it is. What I would do, because usually when you have a crease, it goes all the way across. I'd probably have to play around with the scale a little bit. Yeah, rotate it. It might be easier, honestly, instead of fighting with the procedural, if I just like completely dumped this thing all together. This might be a case where you just do a paint layer and just stroke a paintbrush across and just do it that way. Well, I probably should have done that to begin with. So if I bring the brush down on a paint layer and just paint white, you can tell it's trying to do it. I need to have this be really thin. There it is. It's amazing. So now we're adding creases. Now, the one thing that is going to be probably the most challenging part that you guys do in the lab. I know you're all going to get the concrete wall figured out. You'll get the general wood material figured out. It's the wallpaper part is what's going to be a little challenging for some of you guys because you're going to have to basically layer a wallpaper material on top of it. So what I want you guys to do is go online, find a photo of wallpaper. Wallpaper texture, wallpaper pattern. There's a bunch of really interesting ones out there. I don't remember which one I picked now, but mine's in here somewhere. So find one you like. And I'll even kind of do like a small demo. Like let's say, I'll do it with like a shipping label instead of wallpaper because that kind of makes sense. I'm going to do a shipping label for the box. We're sending this to Clark Kent from Bruce Wayne, apparently. Perfect. So once again, we are going to legally download this. Perfect. All right. So we got that downloaded, paid for it. And let's import this into Painter. Okay, so I'm going to go here, add resource. But let me actually move this to the folder as well. Okay, so we're going to go to desktop. There's the image. I'm going to rename it real quick. We'll call this shipping label. And I think it's going to have an issue with that extension again. So let me just make sure I do .png. Hello? Or not. Okay, fine. Just drag it in there. Let's hope it works. Okay. That one worked. Okay, sweet. This would be a texture because it's like I'm treating it like it's a color image, not an alpha. So texture. Import to probably the whole project, so it's there every time I open this one up. We're going to import it. Okay, there it is. Perfect. Now, for this, we could do a new group if you wanted to and just treat it as a completely different material. I think because it's still going to go on the cardboard, I'm probably going to keep it within this guy. I'm going to kind of do like I did with the tape, where I have a group within a group. This is actually kind of what you were talking about, Phoenix, like putting other groups inside of it, not just doing like random fill layers. So let's add a folder, make sure that's in the cardboard group, somewhere near the top, so it's above the cardboard. And we'll call label group. We're gonna do I'll do a fill layer again. Eventually I'm gonna show you guys normal layers and how to do projections and stencils, but that's a whole other lecture. So I'm gonna stick to fill for this one still. We're going to do a fill, put it in the label group. Okay. Now, this one, I could say, let's do, I'm going to turn off everything except for color. We're just going to use the color to get it lined up. So there's my base color. There's my texture. Drag it over here, just like we wanted. That's perfect. But it's doing that because the label's covering the whole thing, right? It's looking at the UV map and just blanketing it everywhere. So if I go up a little bit, we could say, all right, well, let me scale it down. It's repeating, right? How do I fix that? Yeah, tiling repeat. No. There's one. Okay, so we're getting closer. Now, I don't really know where it is. Well, I can actually see it now. Now, you could, through trial and error, just kind of, all right, that's going horizontal. You know, maybe I want to move it up. Eventually, you will get it in the right spot. Well, that's beautiful. It's also upside down. We'll kind of do something like that. And let's scale that down a little bit. But I know this seems a little clunky, like moving sliders to move it around. In one of the other lectures, I'll show you how to, like, you know how you've done stencils probably in ZBrush before? You have that kind of gray overlay where you start painting over the texture. That's in Painter. I'll show you guys that next week. And we'll start lining up photos and just physically painting over the mask to, like, you know, get very specific details that we want. I like that bend. That's good. But I probably have distortion in the UVs. Move that up. And let's do. It could be. I don't know. And so when I'm scaling it, it's going up and down. This is one of those images that's supposed to be taller than it is wide. So on the scale, I'm going to break the little padlock so I can independently squash and stretch it and kind of like move that around. Let's do that. Okay, there we go. There's my label. I'll just move it down just a little bit. Perfect. We're going to pretend like this looks completely normal. All right. So for this guy, I have a label. The color is good. What should the height of this thing be doing? It should be like lifting up off it a little bit. Yeah, it's almost exactly like the tape. And I want to see too if I can change the filtering on that, because you can see how it's really aliased, right? That's a filtering effect typically. You've seen aliasing issues probably quite a bit, especially if you're using metal ray at any point. That was all over the place. Let me try changing this to sharp or none and see if this looks any better. That looks even worse. There are blur filters, so I could get lucky and try blurring it a little bit. If I put a mask on it, blur the mask. But that guy has some pretty bad aliasing. It might be better if I did a paint layer instead of just doing it this way, but that's all right. You guys aren't going to run into that with the wallpaper because it's going to be so large that you're not going to have to scale it down this dramatically. But let's do height, and I'll do roughness. You can already see it's kind of shiny. Let's take the height and just bump it up a little bit. Now that's like stock paper. Let's kind of bring that down. Just looking at the edge and moving the height slider. Oh, see the issue with the height? That's that cardboard height showing through again. How do we fix it? Go under height. It keeps putting it to linear dodge. Put it to normal. And there it is. And now there's even a shipping label on there. And when you're doing wallpaper, like this is basically what you're going to be doing. Finding a photo, putting it on top of the wall. But with the wallpaper, you know how it's going to cover the wall completely, right? You want to tear it apart so you can see the wall behind it. What is the only thing I'm missing if I wanted to tear the label? Like, let's just pretend the label is covering everything. I need a mask. This label's in its own group, but if I put a black mask on the labels group, couldn't I go in there and do like a fill and then just find a cool procedural that has some like interesting kind of tear patterns? Put a fill. We'll go under procedurals, and I don't know if I'm going to find one for this. Tear. Oh, that is not at all what I wanted. Not fingerprints. Let's see. Yes, that is definitely the one I want. A couple of these are not too bad. I think I'm going to use that one. Not marble, where is it? This one I think I can manipulate to do it. So we'll see if this plaster one's going to work. Oh yeah, there we go. And it looks a little weird because it's partially like see-through. Because you don't have, if you have like wallpaper tear, it's either there or it isn't. It's not like it's partially transparent. So what do I need to fix on this to kind of get rid of this like odd see-through effect that's kind of happening? Yeah, it just needs to be black and white, not gray everywhere. And thankfully, this procedural has contrast built into it. Crank it up. Maybe play with the balance if I want to like not have so much of it missing. Something like that. Now we're kind of getting a torn label effect. This looks a little weird because I have tears in the middle of it. It should probably be more on the edge, tearing inward.
If we use a generator, can we isolate the corners of the
Yes, there are ways to do it. It's almost like an edge detector trying to find the outside point. That gets a little more complicated. The best way to do that would be if you had a generator, I would bring this image into Photoshop. And you know like how in Photoshop you have like the radial gradient? I would save another image out of Photoshop that's the same thing, but basically just a gradient from white to black on the outside. And you could use that gradient to sort of chain with the procedural, and you can kind of blend them, and you'll notice that the procedural kind of edge will change more to the outside. That's a little more complicated, but there are ways to like chain them together to make it happen on the outside.
If you have your tape layer over top of your label layer, and the label has height, would the reflection of the tape respect like label tightness? So it look like it's over the
Yeah. If the tape was over the label.
Like you said, there's like a little bit of height to the label just to make it seem like it's off of the box.
Yeah.
With the tape like being over the top of that label and the cardboard, would it?
It should.
It
So
should show the outline.
Add to it.
yeah, like add a lip right there, right? Yeah. Let's find out. Right now my label's over the tape, but I can change that, right? Just drag the tape group above, put it over. It's on it. Now it's trying to do it, but if I look at the height, it's kind of hard to see in the projector, but there's actually like a faint line right here, which is like barely a lighter gray. If I were to go to the height on the tape and try to put this back to, I probably can fade it out. Maybe actually put this to add. Kinda. It's sort of working. I think in that case, because I'm having a hard time getting it to react with this and not have the cardboard mess it up. I think in that case, what I would do is probably leave this the way it is, but then on the tape group, I could actually put another fill layer and pull this information to like manually force the height of the tape to go up in that spot. Again, that's a little more involved. I can kind of sit down with you guys one-on-one if you're trying to have something very specific like that happen. But yes, that is definitely possible.
So now instead of using a fill layer for the label, to put that like grunge scratches in there,
Yeah,
would it be better to use it as a brush? That way you have like
you totally could do that. Absolutely.
So you
Yes.
have like control over where the scratches go, and you can like kind of work it up from the top or something.
Yes.
Or the bottom.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, you can totally use a brush if that's easier for you. And if you guys do want to get into like just pulling an image and just projecting it on the surface, like was kind of what you're talking about, just look into this guy right here. We're not going to talk about today because we're running out of time. But if you just do a search online for like substance painter projection, you'll find some documentation and videos on it, and I guarantee you're going to figure that out pretty quick. So that would be your other option right there. And I think that's why mine's aliased. If I had done it this way, it probably would have looked pretty clean. But this is used with a paint layer though. All right. So that is what you guys get to be working on today: the wall and the shelf. Well, I kind of want to see what you guys come up with. So I'm going to save this kind of where we're at.